Really very happy to see all of you here today. I think I can speak for all of my colleagues as well. We are here this afternoon for the Big Idea debate, where we have two teams of tertiary level and secondary level students who are going to go head to head about kind of a heavily contested topic. So we are going to find out whether Trinidadian Creole and Tobagonian Creole should be adopted as official languages of Trinidad and Tobago alongside the Queen's English. So I would like to welcome my colleague who has been liaising largely with both teams, Chineri Herbert, just to give you an idea of the format and, information that you might need to know about penalties and your timing and all of that. So welcome everyone and good luck.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for being here for the NGC Bocas Youth Fest Big Idea debate. This is the second time that we're having this debate in person. And we have here UE students from the Public Speaking Club, as well as two students from the secondary schools that we visited through a project called the We Lit project. So I'd like to introduce you to the judges who are here for the debate, Miss Michaela Pandey, Miss Muli Amai, and Roll J. Williams. So we are going to run through, my job here is just to run through the format of the debate, where we will first have a coin toss that will decide who will be debating which side. It's a very technical aspect of this debate where the preparation is wide on both the for and against side, and we will have the students now flip the coin and decide which side of the debate they will be arguing for. Okay, so one side has to choose birds and the other side numbers. Renee is one of the students, the secondary school students, and Tariq is one of the other students. You guys can now come and decide. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah. So, which one do you want to do? Okay. Okay, great. That was simple because she said birds, he said numbers. So, all right. For those of you who didn't see, it's numbers, so 25 cents, yeah. So that means that the group 2, you guys will be debating for the issue, and this side will be debating against the issue. So, okay, we'll just have a 5-minute huddle, and then I will come back with the beginning of the debate. Thank you. Okay, so that's 5 minutes. So, for those of you who do not know, the topic of the debate is the Queen's English is the official language of Trinidad and Tobago. Should Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole be adopted as official languages alongside it? The teams have been preparing their research on the for and against side for this issue, and today we'll be judging them on different criteria. I'm just going to do a short run through of the kinds of things the judges will be looking for. So, preparation, the research process and the organization of materials to make the presentation. Evidence, statistics, facts, and references to authority, items of common or general knowledge. Analysis and argumentation, detailed examination of the issue and structural elements. Presentation, effectiveness of the different elements of debate delivery. That's the basis of the rubric. Those of you who were in the last debate know that debates get very passionate and we all have an opinion about who should be the winner. But it's a bit more than that, and we'll be looking at those research skills and ability to analyze and think on your feet. So without further ado, we'll have the first speaker of the affirmative, who will have a time limit of 10 minutes. Mercedes Modest.
Pleasant good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, invited guests, judges, and my fellow colleagues. Just imagine that you arrive at Piaco International Airport and approach the immigration officer, and the first thing you hear is, "Don't forget to beat the iron while it's hot while you're here." In essence, remember to seize all the opportunities that we have to offer in our isles. Predominantly, language can be defined as a system of conventional, manual, signed, or written symbols by means of which beings express themselves, according to Stillman 2022. Particularly within our local society of Trinidad and Tobago, our official language is that of our former colonial powers, Standard British English. However, in connection to our national anthem, this, our native land, we pledge our lives to thee. Have we actually taken pride in our mother tongue? Hence, for this debate, we shall support that Trinidad and Tobago English Creole should be made an official language alongside the Queen's English. This includes it being a part of our identity, a reflection of our culture and our heritage, education, economic benefits, and the efficient communication within our society.
Okay, thank you, Mercedes. So now we will have the opposing side introductory speaker. Let's have a round of applause for Calissa de Vertile.
Thank you. Good afternoon to our honorable adjudicates, fellow debaters, and our viewing and listening audiences. According to linguistics professor Raymond Ludge, the standard language is simply a dialect along with all the others. Everyone speaks a dialect, even if that dialect is the standard language. Therefore, the standard language is simply a dialect along with all the others. Everyone speaks a dialect, even if that dialect is the standard language. Therefore, the power of a standard variety is desired upon historical accident and convention. Our goal today is to highlight this power that the standard English has and to push the notion that the Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole not be considered as an official language alongside the Queen's English. To support these claims today, our panel will be presented by Renee Gomandi, Jeremiah Matura, Nathan Anku, and myself, Calissa DeVritai. Firstly, it wouldn't be fair to continue without diving deeper into the historical connection of the Standard English as aforementioned. According to the book, Introducing Sociolinguistics, it points out that Parisian French, for example, is usually taken as the standard of that language. Yet, if history had decreed that some other center were to be the capital of France, then their standard English, or their language that they use in that country, would be considered the standard language of France. In the case of Trinidad now, the prestige of English under British rule and larger influences of non-Hispanic communities, East Indians, Chinese, Portuguese, Syrians, because one could argue that why not Spanish be our standard English? But because of the rule of the English and the British territory on us and non-Hispanic communities, we have the influence of the East Indians, the Chinese, the Portuguese, and predominantly the British. So why is the English language such a predominant language around the world? It's the 3 times, so standard language. Standard English, for example, has much more status and prestige than any other English dialect. It is a dialect that is highly valued by many people, and certain economic, social, and political benefits tend to occur to those who speak and write it. Standard English has a high status and is described in positive terms such as correct, beautiful, pure, and so on. Other non-standard, non-prestige varieties are often held to be wrong or lazy. Standard English, moreover, is frequently considered to be the English language, which inevitably leads to the view that other varieties of English are some kind of deviation from a norm. So this is just to whet your appetite a little bit. My second speaker, my colleague, will dive deeper into more of these points. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Calissa. So, some ideas were presented by the introductory speakers to introduce us to the topic. What is Standard English? What is a dialect? All of these things are very relevant in considering the motion. Now we'll have our second speakers who will further elaborate on the topic. The second speaker of the first side, pros. Let's have a round of applause. Ishmael Jupiter. Time limit is 10 minutes.
Good day, everyone. Mainly I'll be discussing 4 points, which is how it would be important for our cultural identity, our heritage, accessibility, and economic benefits. Firstly, it's part of our culture. Predominantly, our local Creole should be made an official language as it is a substantial part of our culture. In Machel Montano's song, On My Way, he said, "It's our culture that could never be replaced. It's a piece of history from all creeds and races." Culture refers to a way of life, which is the building block of our language. Through socialization, various languages develop in the communities they are spoken, which reflect their people's culture over time. Namely, many of Trinidad's Creole lexicons were established during the slavery era, such as the word Santi Manti, meaning sans humanité, i.e., without humanity in French. This hybrid was created through the call and answer of the enslaved Africans in the field, creating what we can be deemed a code to plan their revolts without their French colonizers knowing. Furthermore, ergo, Trinidad Creole should be made a language as it sustains cultural retention within our local society. This ensures that what is bespoke to our people assures effective communication in context to being acculturated by a language that isn't our own. Secondly, I'll talk on how it's related to our identity. Furthermore, our language is a fundamental to our identity. Cultural identity involves the feeling of belonging, usually based on one's self-perception, to any social group possessing its own distinct culture. As aforementioned, self-perception plays a key role in identity. However, internal views often derive from external views. For example, within TNT society, persons who speak what we deem improper English are usually deemed uneducated or of the lower class. Hence, this causes a lack of pride in our culture, thereby undergoing cultural erasure due to the negative attitude or rejection and disgust towards our mother tongue. However, we were deemed an independent nation in the year 1962, as you all know. But it seems that we are still bound by the shackles of our former colonial powers. Though the officiation of their language being ours. Trinidad Creole should be made an official language alongside the Queen's English, as it would allow us to truly emulate who we are as a people and take pride in our material culture. This allows us to develop proactiveness, our wayward perceptions, and erase the culture that our native language is inferior and cannot be represented in the formal environment. Moreover, I would like to touch on how the potential economic benefits that having it as our second language would bring about. If you look at Jamaica, Jamaica has its patois as the actual language, and if you look at really how much tourism they have, it's actually really beneficial. Just having their language as the official language is really beneficial in terms of tourism. If you look, a lot of people actually want to be immersed in their culture. They want to know, they want to come, they want to actually, dress like them, talk like them, be like them. And I think if we were to actually make Trinidadian Creole our official language alongside the Queen's English, I can see this benefiting us as a people greatly. By promoting our culture, we could have more influence on a global scale. Cultural appropriation is a real thing, and I think we are losing our culture as a people. We want to be like foreigners, we want to be like Americans, we want to be like Canadians, we don't want to be like Trinidadians. And I see that as a major issue. And I strongly believe that having Trinidadian Creole as our official language alongside the Queen's English would greatly aid us in maintaining our culture. I was taught by this guy in Form 6. He taught me Caribbean civilization, and he said that it's our shame that foreigners have to come into the Caribbean to actually teach history, Caribbean history. And he had tried to inspire us to really get involved and actually learn more about Caribbean history simply because of that fact. It's our shame, I would say. We are losing our culture as a Caribbean people, and we are losing our culture as Trinidadians. And I strongly believe, like I said, incorporating Trinidadian Creole as our national language would benefit us greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishmael. Now we'll have the second speaker who will be arguing against the motion, the Queen's English is the official language of Trinidad and Tobago. Should Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole be adopted as official languages alongside it? Let's hear from Jeremiah Matura.
Good afternoon to the esteemed audience and members of the panel and our opponents. So my job here is simple. I am here to really encapsulate the points as to why we should keep Standard English as the official language, and additionally why the other side, the converse to our argument, which is keeping the Trinidadian, Tobagonian Creole as the official language. I'm here to argue against that. In order to begin my discourse, I want to just look at the context of what a dialect is. A dialect is a variation of a language that we see common. So some main languages we see, we know, everybody know what is English, everybody know French, Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, and so forth. And each of those languages possess simple dialectal variations used by the citizens or residents of the geographic area in which the speakers are. So the notion to have the Trinidadian dialect, the Trinidad and Tobagonian dialect as our standard English does result in some eminent challenges. One of the main challenges, I would say, is that of geography and standardization. So you might ask me, what exactly am I referring to? Well, let us look at geography within our country. We are a multi-island state, a twin republic, as they say, with Trinidadian and Tobagonians. And within each of our respective communities, we all use the dialect. We all like to, hey, what is the scene? How are you going? We like that. That's our informal communication. But even within our country, we have various varieties of that dialect. How many of you're from the north, and when you go down south, they don't understand what you're saying. They say, speak slower. Or you end up in Tobago, and the Tobagonians, they're talking fast, and they say, excuse me, I do not understand what you're saying. Or they use some word, and they say, eh? That happens to me every day in UE. Right? Even in this campus, we are so diverse. Right? I will meet a Jamaican, and he's from a different part of the country, and then I will meet his friend who's from the other side of the island, and I could not tell that they're from the same country. And it's the same thing when they speak to me, or they speak to somebody from Tobago. So we have so many variations within dialect, which is a variation of the standard English for us to even keep track of. So if it is, we put Trinidadian, Tobagonian dialect as the official language, we have a lot of consequences to bear because of that. And part of that has to do with our multicultural, so this brings me to my second point, our multicultural divide within the country, right? So we as a nation, though we are roughly 61 years, we are molded by several historical factors, we have several different backgrounds within the country. So we have African culture, we have East Indian culture, we have Syrian, right? And each of these persons within their respective divisions, they have a plethora of different cultural practices and different words and different meanings and different body language and different intonations that they would use to express a point that will be different from their fellow colleagues within the country, right? So for example, somebody of African descent who is a Christian and so forth may not necessarily understand some of the cultural elements of that of a Hindu East Indian descent, Hindu East Indian descent, right? And so when it is we're speaking about our different cultural heritage and so forth and what we have been brought up to learn and emphasize and express, right? We have to be careful as to how we do it. And that is why standard English. So I know you want to know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about dialect. Well, where does standard English come in? Standard English comes in to that one unique language that we learned from since we were in primary school all the way upwards, right, to the university level. We write our abstracts, our papers, all of our communication, all of our assignments, and even the structure of this debate, where both of my sides, we are all speaking in the standard English, right? So this brings me to my another point, which is how do we look at an international platform when it is we do not use the standard English? Can you imagine a politician going to the UN and saying, why is he saying wham? We all laughed. That is the reality of it. So in order for us to keep our relationship, our ties, and keep that respect amongst our international colleagues, using the standard English is important, right? Because most of our international audience would be accustomed to the standard English, even at universities university schools, institutions that speak, let's say, Spanish or French and so forth. When they do foreign languages, they learn not dialect, they learn standard English, right? So for us to come out, right, and not use the standard English to converse with our international colleagues, it would be difficult, right? Even in an informal setting, right? The next point I want to talk about is that we are looking at this from a perspective where it is language is just based on words and what we say, right? Some of our words have meanings that are conveyed through our non-verbal communication, our intonation. So therefore, when we use certain words, right, it usually follows a gesture. So you can't convey that naturally by just saying, okay, we're gonna create this language, we're gonna make it official, right? So you have all these words and so forth, and it's gonna take a while for us to actually understand the meaning, because there's so many contexts as to why we pronounce certain words, why we say that, and why in certain areas of our country we speak a different way, and that all lends into our historical background, which is very difficult, could be very difficult to convey within the country, within the region, and within the global space, right? So with that, I thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Jeremiah. So now we will have a 10-minute recess to prepare for rebuttals. Okay, so the 10 minutes recess is over. If everyone can make their way back to their seats. Right. As a reminder, the topic of the debate is the Queen's English is the official language of Trinidad and Tobago. Should Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole be adopted as official languages alongside it? I heard a lot of things on the recess. Who thinks that the Queen's English is not sufficient to demonstrate the linguistic reality of Trinidad and Tobago, and on the other side, people who think that it is sufficient in the world stage. I am a linguist and anthropologist while I studied linguistics and anthropology, so I find this debate very interesting, and I'm very excited to hear what these students came up with to rebut each other's ideas. We will be getting into the rebuttals now, and then after the rebuttals, we'll have the conclusion speakers, and we will have an opportunity for a live discussion while the judges come to a conclusion on the winner of the debate. So let's get into the rebuttals. On the for side, we have Tariq Rowland, so let's have a round of applause for Tariq.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panel of judges and my fellow debaters. My name is Tyreek Rollins, and I am the mid-B speaker, also known as the rebuttal speaker for the affirmative team. The first speaker from the negative team has tried to tell you that the Creole language does not represent all of our people. This is wrong. Let's talk about the multi-ethnic composition of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago's ethnic composition is predominantly made up of two groups: enslaved ancestors of Africans and Indo-Trinidadians who immigrated laborers from the Indian subcontinent after slavery was abolished. Mixed ethnicity migrants from Spain, Africa, East and Southeast Asia, and the Middle East make up a smaller third group. The total population is estimated at 40% African, 40.3% East Indian, 18% mixed, 0.6% white, and 1.2% Chinese and other. Tobago is predominantly made up of Africans. They have all helped to shape the other ethnic makeup of our island's inhabitants. Although the Queen's English is the official language of Trinidad and Tobago, the majority of the population speaks Trini English, a Creole language with few rural populations speaking French-deprived Creole, Spanish, or Hindi. The second speaker from the negative team mentioned that Trinidad and Tobago is a dialect. This is wrong. Linguistics and sociolinguistics commonly describe dialects as a variations of single language that are mutually intelligible but differ from one another in systematic ways. Human language has varying degrees of distinction, such as differences in accents, differences in ways specific words are pronounced, which in English usually means differences in vowel, sounds, or specific words. And some language variation is significant, such as differences between English and a related but distinct language like Sweden. Have any of you noticed that the second speaker from the negative team spoke 3/4 of his speech in informal language, Creole language? This would further be elaborated in the conclusion, but I do find it comical that a speech geared to the importance of standard English was immediately contradicted by his constant use of his speech called informal language of the Creole. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, my distinguished panel of judges, I implore you to vote and support for the motion of today's debate based on the numerous points I have wholeheartedly argued against. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyreek. So now we will have the rebuttal from the opposing side, Renee Gormandy.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just 1 second. Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Renee Gormandy, and I'm against the use of Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole alongside the Queen's English. Now, the opposing team, Mercedes Modest, hi, she opened with a lovely statement: efficient communication within our society. Creole is efficient communication within our society, but what about beyond that? Imagine as a foreigner walking into an airport here, and don't forget to beat the iron when it's hot, eh? What does that mean? Even as a member of the Gen Z, I myself have no clue what that means. This is because times have changed, and with the advancement of technology, I now, like most of my peers, have access to proper education where we are capable of learning the Queen's English, unlike the enslaved Africans or indentured laborers, etc., who didn't have that opportunity and had to create their own language, which we know now as Creole, as a means to communicate. The Queen's language is part of our history and culture, therefore it is sufficient. But language can be learned. Anyways, ignore that part. I'm so sorry. Right, so the second speaker, Ishmael Jupiter, made a statement that Jamaican's official language was Patois. That is incorrect, I'm sorry to say, but it is. It is not Patois, it is indefinitely Standard English. It is indefinitely Standard English. Right, and according to the worldoflabor.org, because you spoke a lot about culture, like your whole debate thing was about culture, right? There are many cultural barriers to using the Creole language, such as it can hinder economic exchange across regions, because, if I speak differently from other foreigners and stuff, so they won't understand what I'm asking for when it comes to that. And it would also limit the possibility for perfectly integrating national labor market, and dialect data are scarce, and high quality data is only available in certain countries. Okay, let me end it off here because, again, kind of embarrassing. Wait, I'm not finished. Let me finish. I have one more point. I know they're excited for me to leave and whatever, but let me finish. Right? So the Queen's language is a standard language, which means there's only one variant of this language. Trinidad and Tobagonian Creole has many different variants, because it's heavily influenced by our culture, our history, and, you know, colonialism and all those stuff, right? My question to you is, if we were to make Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole the official language of Trinidad and Tobago, which variant of Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole do we use? Thank you. So sorry.
Thank you, Renee. We will have a short 5 minutes break before the conclusion. It will give you, the judges, some time to consider the rebuttal arguments as well as last deliberation for the groups. Thank you. welcome back. For those of you who are online, you can send in comments for an after debate discussion after the conclusions. So I'd like to invite the conclusion speaker from the pro side, Sancha Lambert.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the judges. Good afternoon to my fellow colleagues. And good afternoon to my opponents. I would like to begin this conclusion by noting that my opponent on this side here, who would have spoken in his points that he would have said in 3/4 of Creole language, I find it extremely comical. I find that we must also note that Standard English is not an original language of Trinidad and Tobagonians, meaning to say that Standard English was forced upon us. We had no choice but to learn Standard English from European people. We had no choice to create our own culture as we were instilled in certain languages that were given to us, such as Standard English. The Creole complex has its historical base in slavery and plantation systems and colonial mirrors. It's important for us to understand that its cultural composition mirrors its racial mixture, meaning that both European and African elements predominate in fairly high standard combinations and relationships, meaning to say that Creole culture is a part of our identity. Culture is a part of who we identify as, because it was our own way of having our own twist on what was our suppression. The ideal forms of institutional life, such as government, religion, family, and kinship, or even education, is a part of what was our systematic way of life that we were taught and forced into. Creole language has its own way of us to have our own language, our own diet, our own folklore, our own family, our own medicine. Because we were allowed to have our own twists on our own language, our own way of life, we can now call something our own. Standard English has its own power, meaning Standard English was something that Standard English is something that we did not have a choice to conform to. Standard English is something that we are forced to taught in our education systems from ages 5 until further on. We don't have a choice to give Creole the chance to have the same power or the same rooms that Standard English is privy to. Creole language should be preserved as it not only signifies moments in history where it shaped the altitude of plantation life, but it created a room for us to express and create, to be able to accept circumstances that were once brought to us. It allowed the environment where people could be understood among themselves, despite the layer of suppression that they were privy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Sancha and affirmative team. Now I'd like to invite Nathan Nanku from the opposing side.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'll be delivering the conclusion for the against side, right? So firstly, I would like to reiterate what the topic was, because it seems as though the other team has forgotten what the topic is supposed to be. So the topic is whether or not the Queen's English is the official language of Trinidad and Tobago, whether it should be the official language of Trinidad and Tobago alongside Trinidad and Tobago Creole, whether or not it should be adopted as such, right? So, firstly, I would like to state that historically Standard English has been the official language of TNT, even though we have also been under the control of the Spanish and the Dutch, right? So if it's such, we have been under the Spanish and the Dutch as well, why is it not our official language? That is because the English were the last colonizers and they left, right? And as such, we have Spanish-speaking towns, Spanish-speaking roads, Dutch towns, Dutch roads that we see in Tobago, right? And we also have an ethnic population of the Indians, the Chinese, the Portuguese, and the Venezuelans, right? All of them, all those other ethnicities have been incorporated into our society as a whole. In addition, dialects have a stigma attached to them, right? It's not to say as though we cannot use the dialect at all. It's just that having it as official language brings down the credibility of a nation. When it comes to an international forum, how it is we are expressed, as you see, if you have ever watched a UN debate, they do not use dialect. Even though dialect is part of their culture and society, they do not use it for international forum. Why? It is seen as informal. When you are speaking informally or we're trying to bring across a point informally, that's when we mainly use it, or if we are in a comfortable setting. Additionally, I'd like to restate some of the challenges that were listed by Jeremiah. So geographically, there's an issue with standardization. Right? There are different areas across the country in which people speak different versions of the dialect. In addition, we have a multicultural society. That was stated many times, that we have a multicultural society, right? And that is the reason why we cannot have a standard dialect stated alongside the Queen's English. That's why we must use the Queen's English as our guideline for how it is we should go as our official language. There are many other countries across the world that use their standard language, such as the French, such as the Dutch, such as the Portuguese. They all have their own standard language. They do not have the variation alongside it, right? The only exception might be Haiti, but Haiti is a different story. In addition, we have the context associated with dialect. Dialect is something that is very difficult to understand if it is you do not live within the society, right? So there are different intonations, different gestures associated with dialect, and here could mean a million different things, right? So to standardize that, we cannot do it. Okay, so to wrap up a little bit, I just want to address the issue of the code switching that Jeremiah used, which is the official term, code switching. He moved between standard English to dialect in order to bring across his points more relatable to our audience, because this is a debate, right? In a debate, you can use whatever strategies that will best be referred to as best be relatable to the audience, right? It also hinders economic exchange among foreigners, that I already stated. And lastly, standard English was not forced upon us, right? Standard English was incorporated and was not forced upon us. It was the guideline for which we have our Creole in the first place. We had slavery and indentureship that took place, and from slavery and indentureship, we had the Creole that was brought upon from that, right? And that also was mixed with the standard English in which the British brought across. So it was not forced upon it, it was incorporated into our culture and how we speak today. So that is all I have for today. Thank you very much, and thank you for letting us speak our points.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. And thank you both sides for presenting wonderful arguments, both in supporting and against the motion. Basically, whether Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole should or should not be adopted alongside the Queen's English as official languages in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll now open up a live discussion. For those of you who are here and those of you who are streaming online while the judges come to a decision on the winner, you guys can participate, the for team and the against team. If you have any thoughts as well, you can contribute now that we're in the end of the debate. So Anyone from the audience would like to ask a question or make a comment on what we've seen and heard about the topic? Yes, sure. No, you can come. You can come. Okay. Okay, so this is Joel Phillips. Philip, sorry.
Afternoon, everyone. So I just have a quick question, which mainly goes to the foresight. Something that I noticed in your debate and the points that you brought up, and also in a conversation I've had during the interims, I had the idea of the story of that Trinidad Creole and Tobago Creole creates, and I believe Nathan said there's different ways to say like, because it gives very emotional responses. So I don't think there's too much functional when it comes to say a business setting, when it comes to Trinbagonian Creole. So my question is, do you think that using or standardizing Trinbagonian Creole and making it an official language, do you think that takes away, say, the beauty or the story that the Creole holds within itself right now if it is to be made official?
Interesting. Would any of you like to respond to that? Yeah. The end? Okay. Yeah, so she'd just like you to repeat the question. So he basically... Okay, no, go ahead.
No problem. So the main thing is, would the process of making Trinidadian Creole, Tobagonian Creole an official language, that documentation process, the time it would take to make one listing of words and the whole process there, would it take away any of the creativity or the freedom that it would have right now if it's only, as it is, an informal language, say right now? Would making it an official language take away any of that creativity?
Yes.
So I'm so short. Okay, so to reply to that question, I would particularly say no, not really, because I understand where you're coming from in terms of the variation within our Creole not being a standardized language. For example, I know someone that's from Togo, and you know how you usually say, is this a boy or a girl? They won't ask what's the gender of the child like that. They would say, what she bring? But if you're not from Togo, you would not understand that that's what they're asking. You might wonder, is it that she's bringing market produce? Is it that she's bringing another child? Like, you don't know what it is. So it would make the situation more, I would say, specific. Because as of right now, yes, it does allow for effective communication, but within the smaller societies, within this large society that we live in, it does allow for effective communication. If you're from the West, you would understand the Western people language. If you're from the East, so I could go on and on and on. So yes, it wouldn't really take away, I would say, the essence of our language, but it would also allow for greater representation collectively of all the people within our society in that manner. So, yeah. And as well, it would erase the entire, which my opposing colleagues constantly, regurgitated, that it cannot be accepted in the formal way. It cannot be accepted if you're in the UN. No, it's because standard English is deemed the superior language. It is all due to perception, and perception is honestly due to, of course, preconceived notion of whatever you think, and whatever you think is often affected by external factors. So because, of course, the colonial powers historically always had, I could go into mercantilism and all of these things over the smaller people, we were deemed inferior, but that's all due to them having that power and allowing them to just have the standard language that if we go into a courtroom, if we go into parliament, that we have to speak in this language. It continues to give them power over us and we stay inferior.
Okay, thank you so much, Mercedes. Does anyone want to continue that? Yes, sure. So, yeah, go ahead. Now, let's remember to be respectful. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So I just have one question about your response. So should we have a totalitarian government that oversees how we speak? What? Yes? Okay.
She said
Okay.
no. Okay, so he asked if we should have a totalitarian government that governs how we speak, and Mercedes responded no. So no, it's very interesting. Lots of the points that you made, and the question in itself whether or not making Trinidadian and Tobagonian Creole official languages, what it takes away or what does it add. And I think in the different discussions we had, everyone has a different opinion on that. Does it add something? Does it take away something? And the key thing is that the topic said if it should be added alongside it, which this team said. So anyone has any other points or comments? Sure.
Hello, my name is Maya. My point is for the against side. One of the points you all brought up was about how many varieties of dialect there are. What do you say about dictionaries that collect the dialect that we speak and translate it into English? Because they're very comprehensive if you haven't seen them. So would you say those are null and void because they don't collect every single variation?
Yes. Sure.
Yes, so frankly, I am aware of these dictionaries that do exist. But what I was really referring to is that, and I would have alluded that in going down to the end, that language is not just what you can read and what you can comprehend. It is what it's a combination of lexicon, syntax, gestures, non-verbal, and verbal communication. And when we are in a setting, when a lot of setting, it really depends on the context. So we were not arguing to say, well, we should throw away the Creole. And that is actually why I kept speaking, code switching, as my colleague would have announced, because I want to show you that I don't want to remove a structure that we already have, which is having the Creole. I'm just saying, I'm just opposed to a change of putting Creole as official language. Sometimes we just have to keep it the way how it is. Now, back to the question. Yes, it comprehends. There are a lot of words that are used and so forth, but a lot of the words in these dictionaries, they can still have different meanings. And remember, we have becoming more regional as opposed to just national only. So it's like, how useful is a Trinidadian conversion in isolation, right? We have to consider a lot of other factors. So that's my response.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeremiah. So, yes. I know that's an interesting point. You know, we can say it's right there and mean right there, 1 meter, right there, around the corner, right there. You know, and you're not finding that in the dictionary anyway. So, any other? Sure.
Hi, really great points that came out from both sides. And I want to ask in particular, and this is for either side to take, right? So I'm not shooting guns on nobody. But in the whole discussion about Queen's English, Creole, and hearing the backdrop and background and context from which you're building your arguments, right? My whole question is about identity, Trinidad and Tobago identity, right? Because when we have these different aspects that represent different things to us, and when we build representation from them, do you think, to some extent, that because we have the standard English and now we're at the point where we're arguing about just keeping local context English, should we now start thinking about what have we as a nation done to remove parts of our identity for us to reach the point where we're having a discussion like this. And if language is a part of that. So the question, therefore, is, as a nation, what is our identity in the language context if we are reaching a point where we have to find out if we can add it, and if what we are trying to add or take away is adding or taking away from who we are as a people, right? Now, you don't have to answer it like an answer, but I want you to digest that question and then give your opinions on it, because it falls on either side in my opinion, yeah?
And this will be the last comment. Any of you? Sure.
I'm glad that you mentioned identity. Identity is a big part of us as any person. Where you come from, I think it's very notable. That's the first language is a big part of our identity. You see it, I think the biggest place for identity is the airport. That's why I opened the introduction with that. As you enter the airport, there's so many different persons from all different parts of the world that would talk to you. You would notice from the accent if it is someone from Britain, if it's someone from Spain, France, and I can go on. And of course, the Caribbean, we are always identified because, of course, the big thing in terms of our phonology, the sing-songiness of how we speak, they immediately be like, oh, you're from Trinidad because you're talking just like that. Yes, I am from Trinidad. So in terms of talking about where we have to, I think more or less the essence of your point is referring to, we have to consider all, like, in terms of representation, all the backgrounds, which is understood because English as well. And what I wanted, my colleague was trying to bring across to you all in terms of the rebuttal, where you always saying that it's a dialect. Trinidad English Creole is not a dialect. It's a beselect because it's considered inferior. A dialect is standardized, which is your language. Standards British English. So I agree in the sense of that it would be a long process for us to talk about, because our identity is it's influenced by indentureship, by slavery, and we could go on and on. So it would take some time, but I think it would be worth the while because it represents us. It's a part of who we are. If they could take enough time, Britain, to go through all of this, because I think English was highly impacted by Latin and all of these things, to develop a language that they could call their own. Why can't we take the time to develop something that's our own? And I think we fail to realize that because we especially live in a society that we want things that are so easy. It comes right now. It's now. We don't think about the sustainable impact of it. What will it mean to us tomorrow? And that's why cultural retention especially is very important. Instead of us just going with standard British English, it's erasing our culture. That's why Gen Z don't know things like, oh, we should beat the iron while it's hot, or crap will smoke your pipe, or cockroach will belong in fall party. They don't understand things like that because of cultural erasure. As soon as you enter primary school, I remembered once, my grandmother was a teacher, and if I tell her, Granny, give me that, the side eye will get bombastic. That was it. Because you need to know, they would have, of course, told you time and place. Creole English is not acceptable there now. But that's why we should take the time to appreciate our language and refine it in a way that everyone could understand.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mercedes. Now, I'd like to invite one of the judges, Ms. Muli Amaye, to share on the judges' deliberation and the winner of the NGC Bocas Youth Fest Big Idea Debate 2023.
Now, this might be the biggest joke because I speak standard English. Sorry. But it's not the Queen's English, I must point out. I'm from Manchester. We don't have the Queen's English. I would like to thank both teams. I think you did extremely well. I think that you got your points across in a really clear manner. Yes, even you did. You all did really well. We were impressed with what you had to say. And because you had such a short time to actually develop what it was that you wanted, I would say that you all did much better when you just relaxed into it. You young lady, answering those questions at the end, and you gave us such a short introduction. When you're debating, relax into it, believe what it is that you're saying. And once you believe what it is that you're saying, it will come across and everybody will hear what you're saying, okay? So, it was difficult. It was difficult because you both gave really good arguments. But the 4 team took it. So Team A is our winner of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Team A and Team B, for your presentation, your willingness to participate. Thank you to the judges for being here, and for those of you who are here in the live audience and those of you who are at home. I would now just like to ask the winners to come up so that we can take photos. And thank you all, and the judges as well. And we will also take a group photo with the opposing side. But it's off.